Hello and welcome to the show. Now, Muhamad Desai is here from BDS. Probably you've been hearing this a lot, the Faizal case, the issue with Woolworths, a whole lot of things going on around the world, the Israeli-Palestinian matter. And finally, I've got Muhamad here. He's been recently in the news also with the Virgin Active story. But what's important is for us to understand BDS and understand the people behind BDS for us to understand the campaign. Muhamad, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Shukran.
Now, your name, you're quite young, I must start with that, because I thought when I heard Muhamad Desai from BDS, I thought it was going to be this guy coming here, suit and tie, grey hair and all, but that wasn't you. I want to understand you as the activist first. Before we talk about BDS, who is Muhamad Desai?
Well, I grew up in a small town, Port Shepstone, the lower south coast of Natal. I did my high school there, and I was fortunate enough to have a gap year before I went through to varsity. And that's when I actually first got involved in the Palestinian issue, when I spent 3 months in Jerusalem with a Christian Palestinian organization actually called
You spent 3 months down there?
Yes, in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem. And after those 3 months, I then returned to Wits University, spent 5 years at Wits, where I was one of the co-founders of the Wits University Palestine Solidarity Committee. That's where we got up to a whole lot of naughty things in terms of, and that's where we found our political feet and started to first understand the solidarity movement. In 2009, a group of us students then formed a full-time organization, BDS South Africa, to plug into the larger BDS movement internationally and to drive the BDS campaigns locally in South Africa.
So the activism part was something that came, it was university days, but I remember just before the show, you told me that there was something with your parents or maybe your father that was always conscious about the Israeli-Palestinian matter. Was that defining moments for you? Were those moments that maybe set the tone for who you were later to become?
Well, I think that growing up, I was fortunate to be in a household where we were encouraged to be active and to stand up for what we think is correct and to stand against all injustices, any injustice, no matter where it may be. So I remember even back in high school, there were issues of students not being able to wear religious garbs or religious items on them, and it was something that really annoyed me and something that I took up back then at a high school level. And I think that that sort of spirit is what carried through when I entered my university days, at least. But it was really being in Palestine and seeing the sort of violent assault on the very dignity of another people that really pushed me further into this area. But also, it's not that you necessarily, say you take up an issue against child abuse or an issue against animal abuse. It's not necessarily because you hate another person, it's more because you love that child or you love. Likewise in Palestinian solidarity work, it's because of a deep sense of love that we have for the other person, a deep sense of connection to your fellow human beings.
Are you saying that all the activism that you're busy with and what BDS is doing is sometimes not geared at organizations or other political bodies, but the bottom underlying premise may be the humanitarian components?
Absolutely, it's about the human dignity.
I think a lot of people miss that point.
Yeah. And it's also, from a religious point of view, it's a ruh of Allah that is in all of us. It's that sacred space that's in all of us, in all human beings, that should be protected. And what the Israeli government is doing is, in a sense, going against that very human dignity that is in us.
Do you take BDS as a sort of culmination, an exit point for growing up within this sort of activist kind of realm, and then getting involved on university with these kind of things? Do you find BDS to be the solidification of all of that?
Well, look, the Palestinian issue, we often come out when there are attacks on Gaza, when there are massacres on our TV screens, when we see the over 551 children, for example, that were killed in 2014 by the Israeli government. But we often come out in anger on the streets of Cape Town or Durban or elsewhere in the country or on the continent and beyond. But it's a once-off thing. And there was a need, and there is a need, for consistent advocacy work in order to stop the next bomb, in order to stop the next kid from being killed, in order to stop the next house from being demolished. Often Muslims, we're very good at building mosques and fundraising for the building of mosques, but we're not very good at stopping the mosques from being destroyed. And so BDS, or the BDS movement, is a proactive way to go to the root cause, to go to the Israeli regime itself. There is a story that's captured in the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions report. A few years ago, a Palestinian woman, her house was demolished, and aid workers, humanitarian aid workers, rushed to her assistance, wanting to give her medical supplies, wanting to provide her with shelter for the night, blankets, clothing, etc. Her entire house had just been destroyed. And the aid workers were actually chased away by this Palestinian mother. They came again, they tried to assist, again they were chased away. And much later, ICAD, the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, approached her to find out why. Why did you chase away the aid workers? And she responded that Palestinians are not victims. They're not victims of a natural disaster like a tsunami or an earthquake. Their root cause is the oppression coming from the Israeli regime. And so BDS is going to that root cause. How do we isolate the Israeli regime and force it to end its occupation against the Palestinian people?
Muhammad, now we see that BDS is an organization that kind of got out there. I mean, United Nations, everyone's noticing what BDS is doing, so you're having that impact. Whether it's the impact directly that you want right now might be a different matter, or the levels of that impact might be discerning to various people. But the fact is there's an impact. The brand BDS has got out there. But the actual inception was with you wanting to be part of the BDS movement around the globe. How has that taken off? Has it taken off well in your view?
Well, the Palestinians called for the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign in 2005. This is when you have the largest, broadest and most representative grouping of Palestinian civil society, women's organizations, youth groups, trade unions, and national and Islamic forces, all gathering in Ramallah and issuing a call for a program of boycott, divestment and sanctions with three very specific demands: an end of the occupation, full equality for Palestinians, and thirdly, the right of return of Palestinian refugees to be respected by Israel. And we saw a shift when Palestinians issued this call in 2005. From a principal boycott, which my father's generation and other generations may have had against the Zionist regime, you saw a shift from a principal boycott to a strategic and political campaign to hold Israel accountable for its violations of international law. And this shift from a principle to a strategic campaign has led to major and significant victories. This focused campaigning has led, for example, to the Dutch pension fund, Swedish pension fund, Norwegian pension fund, all divesting from Israel. You have Israel's largest exporter of fresh produce, called Agrexco, going into complete bankruptcy because of active BDS campaigning in the cities of Rome, Paris, London, and elsewhere in Europe. You have various banks in Europe that have blacklisted Israeli or doing trade with Israeli banks. You have over 17 European Union countries that have issued official warnings to their businesses not to trade with Israeli companies that may have any sort of illegal Israeli activities. You have the Presbyterian Church, Methodist Church, United Church of Christ, all divesting from Israel. You have the world's richest person, Bill Gates, divesting over 2 billion rands worth of stock from a security company called G4S because of its involvement in the Israeli regime and in the Israeli prison system specifically. Locally in South Africa, you have the University of Johannesburg in 2011 that terminated its relations with Israel. You have a South African agricultural company called Carsten Farms ending its relations with Israel's Hadi Klaim. So you have these various victories over the years that have culminated now 10 years later with the United Nations producing this report that has documented how the Israeli regime has lost out on 46% on foreign direct investment between 2014 and 2015. And according to the authors of this report, one of the primary factors being the international BDS boycott Israel movement. So the movement, the BDS movement is moving, and it's moving at a supersonic speed. It's moving at the speed which is capturing not only the public attention of the Israeli regime, but also having an impact on the financial and economic part of the Israeli regime.
Muhammad, this makes you a wanted man. How do you deal with that?
Wanted hopefully by our communities to come and do programs, but yes.
You've got a fair share of enemies out there. You sit at night, I know you're not married yet, but so the wife's not there kind of thing. And I want to kind of just delve into that a little bit, because I think that people need to understand that it's fine for us to go out there once a year in Cape Town and decide to march. Must be honest with you. Some people might take this up with me, but I'm not attending the marches at the moment. I feel that from a media point of view, we try and do things to make sure that the right story gets out, and that's my level of activism with regards to the Palestinian-Israeli matter, and then uniting with people like BDS. I feel that that's our contribution. So a march for me predominantly is not what I find does much work, but I suppose it suits certain people. But being in all of that, and you doing what you do, you go home at night, do you ever think that, yes, you're doing the world a favor, you're doing a lot of kids a favor in what you do? You might not know it, but there are kids that probably sit there and they were saved today because of what you do. But how does that make you feel from a positive point of view? And are you scared sometimes that you could be taken out, and that's a reality?
Look, we shouldn't be arrogant in terms of dismissing the kind of threats and the kind of harm that may be caused to us by the Israeli regime. I mean, the Israeli government itself, Netanyahu, has said how the Mossad, the spy agency of the Israeli government, has been activated to monitor the BDS movement across the world and the various BDS organizations. We know from the spy cables, for example, that were released by one of the TV networks, how former spy agents from the Israeli government, together with pro-Israeli business people in South Africa, approached our then Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, and made a threat to him that if the ANC and the South African government doesn't stop having relations with BDS South Africa and the larger BDS movement, that the Israeli agents will launch a cyber attack on our finance industry. So there are some legitimate reasons for us to be cautious, but we can't be too cautious either, because this is exactly what the Israeli government will want us to do.
Correct, yes, but you're more referring to from on a broader point of view. I'm referring to Muhamad Desai.
Personal.
As a person.
Well,
how do you feel about that?
Well, there's two parts, I guess. The one is, you have to be, well, I try to be humble about it as well. That you are.
Is your mother worried?
My mother is more worried that I don't come home to see her often enough. But but it's about you doing your small part. You're doing your small part in a much larger plan. And at the end of the day, we have to fulfill our own roles and hope that we are contributing sufficiently to a struggle. So at a personal level, yes, we must be cautious, but not overly suspicious, because then we'll be frozen in our activism.
Of course, yes. Now, there are many things going on around the world with regards to oppression, and I know that BDS seems to focus on the Palestinian-Israeli matter. What's your thoughts? Do you ever feel that at some point BDS maybe, or are you sometimes lobbied into taking roles in other forms of oppression that might happen, whether it's in Kosovo, for example?
It's an important question, because often people ask, what about this, what about that, what about this?
Because that's the humanitarian component.
Yeah, but at a personal level, yes, I'm very much involved in various other struggles. I mean, during the xenophobic attacks, I was part of some of the programs that were initiated in Gauteng, for example. When it comes to the various other international issues, whether it's Swaziland or Cuba or Western Sahara, we are, as members of BDS, of the BDS movement and as BDS South Africa, involved. But there's no crime either in setting up an organization that specifically works on animal abuse or specifically works on child abuse. That is your focus as an organization, but as individuals, we are multifaceted. And there I'm involved in various other activities.
Correct, yes. Where do you see all of this going? I know that it's the political landscape and economic landscape is one that is a shifting dynamic all the time, and there are various forces that are at play globally and locally. But where do you see this going with regards to the Israeli-Palestinian matter? Do you see some light in the end of the tunnel?
Well, to pick up from your previous question, It's firstly about creating a more safe and more human world where a child can be a child, where a mother can be a mother, where a father can be a father. So that's the larger struggle, the larger world that we're trying to create. Specifically on the Palestinian-Israeli issue, Israel is losing out both on the finance part, on the PR part, and it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, where Israel is forced to negotiate with the Palestinians for a just solution. It's happened here in South Africa, and there's hope and there's confidence that it's going to happen there as well.
What's your advice to some of the youngsters, especially we've sort of headed into, I know you're quite young, but we have a spate of youngsters that have come up now, and the level of activism is either totally redundant, or they're not involved with reading things anymore. They're more involved on social media, playing games. They don't even get involved with sports anymore. So we see this whole spate of people coming up there. What's your advice to them to get involved with organizations like yourself so that you can make a difference?
Well, firstly, switch off Pharrell Williams' music until he ends his relations.
I wanted to bring up the Pharrell Williams issue with you.
Okay.
Have you, while you're at that, have you ever tried contacting his office for any issues around that? Because I know that Woolworths is making a big noise about you guys. They are concerned. I know Woolworths is busy with this one aspect. I saw it last week. I think that they're concerned with your campaign against Pharrell Williams when it does come. And I think they want to cut off any type of communications with other media and all kinds of things going on there. Have you tried making contact with him on that?
Well, we wrote a 5-page letter making our case to Pharrell Williams why he should postpone his collaboration with Woolworths until the company ends its trade relationship with Israel. We've sent it to his agents in the USA, to his agents in
Any response
Europe.
on that?
No response whatsoever. So we then went to social media. We tweeted, we Facebooked, we Instagrammed, and we sent out the letter to him.
I've been retweeting some of those things.
Still no response from him, which is kind of arrogant for somebody who claims to be interested in civil society and in human rights. We do know that Woolworths, the company, has been pressurizing and threatening media houses not to cover the boycott Woolworths campaign, let alone, I mean, we're not even talking about supporting the boycott Woolworths campaign, we're just talking about coverage of the campaign. But it's bringing out of Pharrell Williams to this country to try to counter and combat the boycott Woolworths campaign is proving to backfire. You have, for example, the fact that there's going to be a protest march in Cape Town and in Johannesburg of thousands of people outside of Pharrell Williams' concert. You have this news item already reaching the New York Times, the Rolling Stones magazine, and various other international media publications. So instead of giving Woolworths a good image, it seems to be bringing up this issue of them having this trade relationship with Israel. And a trade relationship which has resulted in Woolworths now being under a consumer boycott that the largest consumer boycott that this country has seen since 1994. But specifically to young people, the victories that we are achieving, whether it's the churches that are divesting, whether it's Bill Gates that is pulling out of G4S, or whether it's the European Union that is issuing warnings, or the millions of dollars that Israel is losing out on FDI, is really because of ordinary people being part of this extraordinary movement. And we're really urging young people, start off on social media, on your Twitter, on your Facebook, on your Instagram, to start off by popularizing the BDS movement, by challenging various artists out there as to whether they support the boycott of Israel movement. Because at the end of the day, it was young people in their millions across the world that mobilized, in whether it was the USA or whether it was France, whether it was the UK and elsewhere. They mobilized in their millions, literally their millions, in order to stand up for us. And likewise, we now have the opportunity to be part of this international solidarity movement and contribute positively towards a better world, which we all hope to be living in.
Well, what's the future for BDS South Africa? Do you find an expansion, a diversification of campaigns? What is the future? I know that the Palestinian-Israeli matter will continue till the end of time. I think we've established that it has come.
Hopefully
and it's
not.
going to continue. But on what level it continues may be the deciding or differential factor. What's the future of BDS, especially with this campaign and maybe some other campaigns down the line?
Mahatma Gandhi's old saying comes to mind that first they ignore you, then they mock you, then they fight you, and then you hopefully win. We're currently in the fighting stage. Initially, when we first started off, they dismissed us as a fringe movement that's just based on campuses. Then they mocked us that no, we'll never be able to take down the Israeli regime, which is so intertwined in the international economy. But now they're fighting us. Now they're setting aside millions of dollars. We know, for example, Sheldon Edelson from the casinos in Las Vegas convened a conference in order to fundraise monies to counter this non-violent international movement. So we're about to enter the most difficult, challenging, and protracted part of the BDS movement. But we are confident that we can give them a good run for their money, but we do need support from our communities and from members of the public in order to have that muscle, because at the end of the day, it's communities across the world that give the BDS movement its strength in order to have its impact. Locally in South Africa, we started off with the academic boycott, we moved into the G4S and business boycott. We're currently running the consumer boycott around Woolworths. But this doesn't mean that at the same time we're also continuously lobbying the South African government to impose state sanctions on Israel. We've made certain advancements on that level, and we're hoping to push those advancements that we see concrete sanctions. But at the same time, we're appealing to members of our community to plug into this campaign by at least being part of the Boycott Woolworths campaign, which is a public part of our movement.
Just staying on the Woolworths matter, I'm going to ask you a question that I think is going to be a bit of a difficult question, but I think that I want to just find what is your take on something. I don't believe that that the question is going to in any way seem that I'm pro Woolworths or any organization, but I'm just asking the question from the other side. Muslim staff working for Woolworths, how do we deal with that?
Well, actually, we
because you know what the ramifications might be there.
Well, it's not only Muslim staff. I think it's staff in general should be the worry. But we didn't just choose Woolworths willy-nilly. We actually conducted research. We actually formulated a strategy. And when we chose to go after Woolworths, because it claims to be this ethical company, claiming to be interested in responsible sourcing, we actually went out and met with staff. We met with the staff members, both in the Western Cape, but Gauteng as well. And we also engaged with the unions, SACTU, SACAWU. We engaged with the leadership of these unions representing the workers. And not a single one of the engagements that we had were the workers anti the boycott campaign. Some of them made it very clear that they can't publicly get involved or be seen to be endorsing, because the company then may victimize the staff members, and so they ask for a certain distance to be created. You know, some of the young people are going and doing these till jams where they load their trolleys with Woolworths products, and then they go to the tills, something from the 1980s actually, and they refuse to pay for the items after having it rung up. And the feedback the feedback that we've received is that actually the staff members have been quietly supportive, even though it's quite a nuisance that you have to repack these goods, that in some of the stores where these till jams were taking place by members of other organizations, we've been told by these organizations that actually the staff members have responded positively and have actually also taken the position, if Woolworths has a 0.1%, a 12 million rand trade relationship of mostly agricultural products that can be sourced locally, why isn't Woolworths giving up that trade relationship? Because sourcing it locally will actually increase the job market, will actually create more incentives for the local economy. So we've actually got positive feedback from the workers. There have been some people in management that are quite upset about the campaign, but not because of job losses, because of the kind of PR impact and kind of position that it puts them in.
Correct. Yes. Now we see all of this happening, and it's been going for the last months, and it's been getting a bit hectic, and we've been watching all of that. If I was to tell you that there are 3 directors of Woolworths watching the show right now, in a few lines, what would you want to tell them?
Asking them to appeal to their sense of humanity. There were 551 children killed last year, over 2,000 Palestinian mothers and fathers that were killed. There's no reason to be sourcing products from a regime or from companies of such a regime. We're asking you to simply source those products locally or elsewhere on the African continent and celebrate you. We'll celebrate Woolworths just as how we celebrated Virgin Active recently, that initially barred access because of a BDS t-shirt. We then celebrated them because they did the right thing by apologizing and by affirming the rights of people to wear Boycott Israel t-shirts. Likewise, Woolworths, do the right thing, be on the right side of history, and let us jointly celebrate your contribution to that history.
Muhamad, thank you very much. Thank you for coming to DNTV and allowing us to interview you. And also, from a DNTV perspective, you know that we look forward to continual relations with the BDS movement of South Africa. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Well, that's Muhamad Desai from the BDS movement South Africa. And he's telling us all to do the right thing. As you can hear, someone that's really involved, very entrenched in what he's doing, and doing something that might affect the world, around the world. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.